So defining the stakeholders, this is really important. As a rule of thumb, 5% of the beekeepers own 95% of the colonies. And what they do to manage their colonies is completely different than the 95% of the beekeepers who own 5% of the colonies, which are the backyard beekeepers. And so that's really important. So some of the ideas that I'm going to present now might not be applicable if you're a commercial beekeeper, but I think it's worth thinking about to seeing if there's ways of incorporating some of the concepts. I want to talk about this. This is a scholar who was a grad student in Belgium. I was co-supervising her, and she wanted to compare the US situation with the Belgian situation. And so she wanted to concentrate her effort on this region. And we know that treatments and their effectiveness are very regional dependent. As someone pointed out, in Mississippi, treating in August is ridiculous because all the honey's gone and it's way too hot. They shift everything in June. So everything is seasonal and regional dependent. And so we just wanted to use this one as a model, and now we're going to go and do the different regions. So I want to show those results. So here she has all the different products used in the southern USA, and you can see Coumaphos, very high levels of loss. Hopguard was not very efficient. We saw Amitraz being very efficient, and some of the other products. But we wanted to know, well, what combination of products did? And so one thing is total number of different products used. So this is no products, one product, two product, three product. Well, here it looks like it doesn't matter how many times you treat. And it turns out in the south, you probably need to treat a lot fewer times than in the north. And I don't really understand that because it goes against the convention of this continuous brood rearing. But this is something that's keeping on going up. And it's annoying and it's irritating and embarrassing, but I don't really understand it. But it's consistent. So what is that? Oh, yeah, another. Yeah, it's a landmine. Well done. So here we have thymol and formic acid. So this is someone who used thymol once and then used another product. So it seems that all the thymol once seems very effective. Here's someone who used formic acid once and then another product. And so it seems like some products you need to have two different treatments versus not. And that would make sense in the south, perhaps. I'm only bringing this up because I think that it's a lot more complicated than just one go at it. I don't know what I was going to say here. Screen bottom boards. We do see 3 years we saw no effect for people who use screen bottom boards, and 2 years we did see an effect. If I was a beekeeper, I would have screen bottom boards. Whether you're a commercial beekeeper or not, I would have screen bottom boards. And here's why. Because you're losing 4 to 18% of your mites. But if you have a treatment in there, some treatments will knock the mites off but not kill them. And so they recover, you know, they've been jostled around and they jump on a bee that passes by. If you have a screen bottom board, it removes them from the population. So I think you're slowing resistance buildup. I also think that when you move colonies, every time you open a colony, it increases the number of mites that gets dropped. We know this because we put water treatments as our control treatment on some colonies, and we see increased mite drops. And it's not from the water, it's from the fact that we put the water on the colony and had to open the colony. And so moving your colonies around with screen bottom boards, I think you're going to lose mites too. So I would always have screen bottom boards on all my colonies. I don't think that, except for the most extreme environments, you'd need to shut these down in the winter. Colonies are very good at keeping it the cluster size there. I would not close my screen bottom boards. And I'm coming from Canada, Ontario, and I wouldn't do it. Here you can see that broke down by region. In the northern states, we see a much more dramatic and significant effect than in the southern states. I want to talk a little bit about brood management and drone brood removal, and I think that's sort of going to nearly finish everything. If I was culling my comb and I found a frame that had more than a fist-sized frame of drone brood on it, or comb on it, I would cull that comb. Because drone brood is a great breeding ground for mites. Now, some of you say, well, they need some drones. Yeah, they'll find that drones, they'll build the bridges. And if you really wanted to produce drones, put a drone comb in there so you know where the mites are. But I would not leave a lot of this hanging around in my brood chamber. We also know from a lot of work that drone brood removal works. And that's because we talked about this before, Varroa mites prefer drones. And so if there was a way of pulling out those drones regularly, that would be great, because then we can remove the drones and the Varroa that are feeding on the drones, and that would be a good thing. The reason you don't, the important thing though is that if you're going to do this, you have to come in every 24 days and remove that comb. Because if you don't do it on day 24, you've just accelerated the number of mites. Now if you're like me, and on day 24, and it's really hot outside, and you've got 3 honey supers in all your colonies, you're going to make every excuse possible not to go and take the drone broods out, because it's too much work. And so what we did was we developed this 2-tower system to help alleviate that. And so these are 2 full-blown colonies with a queen. This is one of those flush queen excluders here. And then we put all our honey supers over here. The great thing about this is it has exactly the same advantages of a double queen system. You actually produce 30% more honey than you would in 2 separate colonies. So you have a 2-queen system. And what happens is then you can pull this off and you can pull out the drone frame from each side there. I will say that one of the problems we had with this is that if one of these sides went queenless, they didn't replace the queen. So if it went queenless, you'd only have 1 queen. But these bees would take care of this comb, so you wouldn't get small hive beetle or wax moth over there. Now what do you do with this frame of drone brood? Well, one of the things you can do is you can make some great pâté and go to the farmer's market. You can stick it in the freezer, that works. And a disproportionate number of beekeepers keep chickens, so you can feed it to your chickens. Hi. So this is the mite drop over the course of the season. So what you can see is it all was about the same for the tower colonies, and then these are the control colonies, but you can see how it's spiked here. And so basically what we've done is we've bought some time by using the drone brood. It didn't allow you to forego treatment, but it bought you time between treatments.
What about freezing it and feeding it back to the colony?
Yeah, so you can freeze it. I wouldn't put it frozen into the colony. That would just be cruel. But I would just thaw it out and then put it back, and they can clean it out. And so this is what you can see as the total results. This is before, and this is at the end of the season. So you can see this was these are mites falling per day. So it's a little bit of a different measure, but you can see there's a big difference there in terms of the single colonies and the tower colonies. And so drone brood removal does work, and hopefully this is one of those practical solutions to the pain in the butt drone removal is sometimes. Small cell size, a lot of people are talking about small cell size. Experimentally, it doesn't work. The experiment's done. There's a lot of people who've written grants about this, a lot of people who've done these experiments, and there are very few experiments published. The only reason you do that is if you don't have results. And also, the epidemiological data suggests no significant difference either. There's no validity to small cell size causing, and that is across regions as well. No difference in different regions. Mite-tolerant bees, of course, this is the be-all, this is the big solution. This is the long-term solution. We need mites that are resistant to bees. And we've got different Russian bees, VHS bees, buckfast bees, and they all work, like we do that with the bee-informed tech transfer teams. We test for hygienic behavior and all of these things. One of the big problems we have, of course, are the landmines that we see these populations spreading. So even if you had a resistant stock, it's not going to survive a whole bunch of landmines going off beside it. The other thing to remember is that when you're breeding bees, you're breeding 1 generation a year. But how many generations of mites are there? There's lots of generations. And so in those populations where we find resistant bees, like in the Arnott Forest in New York, we see these colonies of bees in trees, and they're doing fine without mites. We find that they're in isolation. They're 3 miles away from any of the neighboring, or 3 kilometers away from any of the other colonies, which means that if the mites kill the colony, they kill themselves because they can't move to their neighbors. And so what we're finding is that those mites are less virulent. They're not having as many kids. And so in many cases, these resistant stocks are in fact simply the fact that the mites are less virulent than not. Having said that, I certainly would be using these stocks Less than 10% of survey participants are, but we don't see a lot of evidence that people who are using these stocks are doing better than not. The one thing we do find in some years is that the people who only use one type of bee in their apiary do better than people who have different types of bees in their apiary. And I think that sort of goes to that idea of consistency. You sort of want all the bees in your population to have the same number of bees or to be about the same size, because that's much more amenable to management. So I'm not saying that these don't work. I just don't think they work on their own, and if they do work, they only work when you're in isolation, where you have control over those landmines invading your colonies. So with that, I have a lot of people to thank. I have a great lab of permanent people that work for me, or work with me, I guess is a better, I work for them maybe is a better way of saying it, at the University of Maryland. We have a lot of undergrads working. I have some great grad students and postdocs, and we're very close to the Beltsville Bee Lab, which is 10 miles down the road, and so we have a lot of collaboration with them. The Bee Informed Partnership is this very extensive network. We're in our 5th year of 5 years of funding, but we've developed some models and strategies to be self-sustaining. You'll hear more about that in the coming months, I'm sure, where we are going to carry on some of these activities beyond the funding cycle. And so we have that team to thank and a whole bunch of other people in the field doing a lot of work. All told, we have about 50 people right now working on the Bee Informed Partnership across the country. So it's a really exciting thing to be part of. A lot of different people to thank in terms of funding. And we've been really very lucky with the support we've received from many groups across the country. So thank you. I did it at 4. Yeah. All right. So I think we're going to have Randy up, and then we'll ask. So it's open for questions for both of us. And certainly you should answer some of the Varroa questions too. So. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great question. So the question is there any benefit to reducing the broods or to breaking the brood cycle? And I apologize that those slides didn't get in here. Absolutely. I think there's a lot of data, both informal and formal, that shows that if you, by breaking that brood cycle, if you take out one brood cycle, you've stopped one generation of mites, which is good. So you're going to half the population. This is why people who split colonies tend to lose a lot fewer colonies than those who either buy packages or establish colonies. We think it's because you're interrupting the brood cycle and it's having an effect on the Varroa. It's also why queen producers consistently, I think, have fewer losses than other producers. And that's because the act of queen rearing requires you to do so much brood disruption. I think they're lowering the mite population throughout.
Is there any ideal time of the season to do that? June or July? Or
So I wouldn't do one of these queen trap things. Randy, you feel free to. And so the question is what's the best time of year to do the brood interruption? I would split my colonies and introduce a queen, and that would be my brood interruption. I wouldn't be catching my queen and holding her. And I think that has problems with just time management and honey. But other people may have different experiences.
We do our splitting with, we use the queen cell rather than a queen, then you get a longer break.
Yeah.
It also gives you a window, about 19 days after you make your split, where you come in for a couple of pennies and 5 seconds and hit them with oxalic dribble and start with an extremely clean nuke at that time. In areas where it's dry during the summer, we have like Russians or something where they do their own brood break there. They clean up there also. There's a number of mechanisms that happen when you do the split. There also seems to me something about breaking the transmission of pathogens too. Having a brood break anytime, and I see that also when you do a formic acid treatment, when you get about 4 or 5 days of brood break induced by the formic acid treatment. The brood just comes back looking just beautiful after that. So I got to feel that it helped to clean up transmission of whatever's going on in the brood.
We had a terrible yellow jacket problem this year.
Terrible yellow jacket problem. Pray for lots of rain. Okay, when it's really wet during the winter, the yellow jacket has a hard time overwintering. We have yellow jacket problems in California. Some people use the an anti-robbing screen in the front. I don't have that much of yellow jacket problem. We just keep our colonies strong, and the yellow jackets are out there. And, we don't see much. So Dennis, you got any ideas on yellow jackets?
Well, I mean, it's a problem in the fall, right? That's when their populations are higher. Yeah, that's just sort of part of the system.
Yeah. Yellow jackets, there are baits of the yellow jackets who will carry back to the hive and knock them out, so you can use that also.
But they're good. Yellow jackets are good. Don't kill them if they hurt.
Yeah, we don't bother. I do, when I do wasp, yellow jacket, and hornet rescues, I usually just bring the nests home and hang them in the tree. Sometimes I have 4 or 5 nests hanging around. They're beneficial insects.
We get these calls, especially the last 3 years, we've had a lot of calls about fall swarms. And I'm just wondering if they're not swarms at all, it's colonies that have absconded, with the mites. Do they move as a unit into somebody else's colony, or do they kind of break up?
Man, that's a really good question. And what I've seen, when we first got tracheal mite, shortly after we got tracheal mite, we got a lot of little tiny fall swarms. When we first got Varroa, after a couple of years, late in the fall, we got a whole bunch of little small swarms. When we first got Nosema serranae coming in, late in the fall, we got a whole bunch of little small swarms. I'm detecting a pattern every time we get invaded by a new parasite. It seems like the colonies maybe try to do something to get away from it late in the season. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of defensive mechanism. I don't see it as absconding in my own personal operation. Usually it's they're sending out swarms. Maybe they're just trying to restart the hive or something. But this is something that we've seen, or I've seen consistently every time there's a new parasite invasion. What do you see?
Well, so I don't think that when colonies collapse, that what you're seeing are these little swarms. I think that that's real collapse, and I think that is usually viral-mediated collapse. And we think it's altruistic suicide, that somehow the bees know that they're sick, and so they've evolved so that if they're sick, they'll fly away from the colony, die away from the colony, and save the nestmates, and it's gone bad. We see this in termites, for instance. They'll get a fungal pathogen, and they'll walk out of the colony with the leper's walk, where they pound on the ground saying, "Don't touch me, I'm sick." And so I think that collapse is there. Fall swarming is a natural, if you follow the life cycle of a bee colony, there is a natural period of fall swarming. None of those tend to survive, and so it seems to be a strange adaptation.
We're getting calls where the whole colony is gone.
Right.
And that's still going on today.
Like absconding, and then you're finding that whole colony.
Well, we're not finding they disappear out of the hive.
Yeah, and I think that's collapse.
That's 2 different things.
Yeah, I don't think that's absconding. I bet if you looked, you'd find that fecal matter in there. And it's the strongest colonies in the apiary that are doing it first. And so that's a landmine blowing up, is what that is.
Do you have any take on some of the new stuff that's being done with developing bees that actually attack Varroa mites? I think they're called ankle biters or something like that.
So there are a lot of breeding programs breeding bees, but I think we still have the same problem, that no matter how resistant we can get bees, if you have landmines going off, it's not going to be able to resist that. And so I think that it's a little bit more complicated than just getting the right queen in. It has to be a landscape level thing. And I think that you can do that with any resistant stock. It doesn't necessarily be the ankle biters or whatever, but I think it has to be community-based ideas and thinking. There's one lady in the back. Make sure you get
Let me
her.
continue on this one. Yeah, when you're looking at Marlis Vivic and I were just talking about this, and it's like a herd immunity. And here's a message to get out to people, the treatment-free beekeepers, is you're working against nature. Because what they're doing is, if you really want to work with nature and improve the bee stock, if your bees die, you're out of the game. You're extinct. You don't restock with packaged bees again. So if you really want to work for a breeding program, if your bees die, that's it. You don't have a second chance. Okay? If you want to be a treatment-free beekeeper, you can't start with a domestic bee stock that's not bred to be Varroa resistant. That's a fool's errand to do that. If instead you're collecting feral stock or Russians or something that has demonstrated resistance to mice, and then you want to start working on a breeding program that way, then that's something you could work with. But if you're just starting with domestic stock, you're fooling yourself thinking you're helping nature or bee breeding in any way. You are becoming a nuisance to everybody else. And it says, you got all these mite bombs out there that if there is any resistance starting to form in the local feral stock, you're going to kill them out with the domino effect of these mite bombs as they start collapsing. Just kills everything. You set back natural selection. So you're working against nature if you're doing that. Who's that?
There's the lady in the corner.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any type of a natural predator for this mite from where it's come from?
Okay, is there any kind of natural predator? People have looked at it quite a bit, and it looks like the pseudoscorpions, nothing's really panned out. We're looking at natural pathogens for it, for fungi. There's a couple of them that have been tested. A lot has been problems with them, largely with delivery. The USDA just came up with a new method of growing these pathogenic fungi. It's like a quantum leap in the ability to produce them, to make them more stable. So we might get something out of that. But people have looked quite a bit. Dave Wick right now, actually, if anybody's got a lot of viruses right now, a lot of Varroa, and you have sticky boards covered with them, he wants them right now. He just got some private funding to screen for viruses that attack Varroa and kill Varroa. He just needs as many dead Varroa as possible. If you have a sticky board covered with Varroa right now, Dave Wick would like that sticky board.
Well, I guess where did they originally come from?
They came from Asia.
Okay, so if they came from Asia, don't most things have a natural predator? Is there a natural predator?
They have a host, the honeybee, and the honeybee and the Apis cerana, the host, and the bromide have worked out a workable agreement. Okay, our Apis mellifera have not worked out that workable agreement. Just like your body, you have plenty of parasites on you and within you right now, but you've worked out a workable agreement. Okay, so both sides are comfortable. Okay, and that's what our honey. You are lucky enough to be here at this time to watch this evolutionary process unfold before your eyes. I hope it completely unfolds before I go, okay? But we're in the middle of this evolutionary process of Apis mellifera learning to come to terms with this new parasite for which was totally unprepared, which totally changed the virus dynamics within the colony. Okay, this is a process going on right now. Yeah, Wendy.
Curious to know how long a Varroa will live from emergence on a bee. How many reproductive
2.7.
cycles does she have?
2.7.
2.7 reproductive cycles?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's no bigger average than that? It's closer to 3 in that.
How many numbers do you want?
Well, I've heard 3 and 8. That's why, and that makes a big difference.
I don't know, what have you heard?
I'm trying to figure
Yes.
out. Yeah.
I don't think we know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the only data I've seen is that.
Okay, and
Over.
do you guys know how long a mite lives off the host? If it can, and have you
2 to 3 days.
2 to 3 days? Okay, thanks. And that's why you're advocating screen bottom boards, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they don't usually move more than an inch. So if you've removed them, even if they're alive, unless a bee passes, you're okay.
They don't usually move more than an inch.
When they're not on their host.
I would have to disagree with that from personal observation. I've seen them move quite far and quite fast. And I have a good picture I just took, Dennis, where I was knocking the brood out of combs after I hit him with a capping scratcher after Formic flash, knocking them onto the top of the hives, and counting the number of live and dead mites. And I came back after a few minutes, and there was one bee that was still alive. And the mites from the entire hive cover within that few minutes had all somehow out in the bright sunlight smelled that one bee and all just boom, scrambled on it. The bee was just covered with mites.
Sorry, and you're right. When you first lodge them, but when they're down there and they've been there for a couple of days and they're in that questing thing, they stop
okay.
moving. Yeah, sorry, I meant in the questing stage. When you first jar them, that's a little bit different. But after that, it's not like you see them fall through a screen bottom board and crawl back into the hive. Would you agree with that, Randy?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do have a question on the screen bottoms.
All right.
Because on your recommendation on screen bottoms, because I built 500 screen bottoms and put them on my hives, and now we're phasing them all out. Okay, and because I've shifted towards more fumigants, So thymol and formic acid, both of which are denser than air, which fall to the bottom board. And when those mites fall on the bottom board, they get hit. So, and I don't have strong feelings. I've agonized back and forth over this, but we are going back. We did not see an appreciable effect in running a large operation where about half of them had screen bottoms and half didn't, and after a number of years, we just didn't see the benefit to the screen bottoms and possibly a problem with them as we shift to fumigant treatments.
Certainly, with the fumigant treatments, you need to seal it. I agree. John's been jumping up and down.
Question for Dennis. Could you share with us your feelings about a day of community treatment for Varroa? If not nationwide, region-wide,
Yeah.
or statewide, or...
So we are working with several people, several different institutions that are part of that BIP team, where we've been trying to find some funding to do this. And so I think it's something that we have to start working on. So I think that the idea is that we need to do community level monitoring, and we have to do, perhaps move towards where we try to coordinate counties, or say everyone going into a certain crop, that everyone treats or agrees to treat at the same time. And this way, what we can do is that those people who haven't treated aren't landmines going off in the landscape. And so by trying to do this at a community level, I think we may get stronger results, where we can reduce the number of treatments we need to do because we're not getting this constant reinvasion. How do we motivate that? Well, first of all, I think we have to prove that it works. And so I think we have to do that at county levels in some smaller states maybe to see if it works there. Then transfer that maybe over into cooperative beekeepers. I do think you see this in certain queen rearing pockets, where you see that, say, family teams of queen rearers are sort of all treating at the same time, which may opt into some of their success. We'll go here, then there, then there.
Why does not human-made odoriferous baits to attract the Varroa mites away, why is that not working, or why hasn't it been developed yet?
Well, I think that we just don't have, we know that there's one smell that causes that, for them to stay in the brood. And so that we have that one smell, but it's a contact smell, in my understanding, but Randy might know. Yeah, and so, but I don't think they follow the scent. Do they follow the plume?
No, when they're exposed to the scent, then that tells them to jump off.
Right. And so it's really, so it's not like you can stick a hose there and blow it in and they all march in. And then the other one is the sex, is when they want to have sex. There's a sex pheromone. And that tends to be the most promising, and the Germans are following that. It's just dispersal. How do you get this into the colony at high enough levels?
Question for Randy. In a recent article, you referenced Dr. Amron and the use of formic acid.
Here.
In his treatment technique, he seals up the colony.
Yes.
My way is to open up the colony. Which way, what matters?
Well, I've been re-experimenting with amines, following up with the flash. We're doing it in hot weather. You start playing with formic in hot weather, it's really, really touchy, just even a degree or two. The other thing is, and I was just talking to Wendy from Nod right here with formic, we're wondering why we had more problems in California with queen loss this year with some of the formic treatments. And my best guess right now is because of the drought, we just have more stressed bees. The other thing is when you're using either thymol or formic acid, which are really, as Dennis says, they are hammers. I mean, they're just brutal chemicals that attack membranes. If you have a very high Varroa level in your colony, you probably have a very high virus level, and you probably have a bunch of really, really stressed bees. Dr. Frank Eischen pointed out several years ago that if you put the same treatment on stressed bees or unstressed bees, you're going to have more bee problems on the stressed bees. So with the formic flash, you got to be careful. The bees have to be in fairly good condition. If you have bees that have very high virus level and Varroa level, you're probably going to have more problems with the bees. My recent experiments I'm kind of excited about is just, if you have a colony that has a super high virus level, to me that's an undesirable queen. I don't mind losing that queen. So you coordinate queen replacement with a strong flash. You don't care about killing the queen because you're planning on replacing the queen anyway. I just got back from Chile, and they were saying, what can we do, Randy? We like to requeen all our colonies in the fall. And I said, it's easier for you to mate out queens in the fall? And they said, yeah, we mate out queens in the fall. And we want to, and they're using every kind of miticide there. I said, fine, if you're going to requeen in the fall anyway, blast them with Formic in the fall. After a day, all the fumes are gone, and stick in your queen cell. Then you kill two birds with one stone. You started with a completely clean colony. You knocked out the mites in the brood with really strong Formic treatment, and you put the new queen in there. I mean, that's a win-win situation. So I think we have to start becoming more creative about how to use these treatments. Dennis just described his ideal mite sequence of treatments during the year. That's almost exactly what I've been doing for over 10 years in my operation, almost to the letter. And we're all often changing it slightly.
You sound surprised, Randy.
We're looking now at maybe using some Formic early in the season. Also, what I'm seeing is, and if Dennis keeps saying these numbers, the difference between starting with a 0.2 and a 0.3 infestation this spring, by the end of the season, is night and day difference. We are really seeing the benefit of getting that mite level down as close to zero early in the season, because it just buys you a ton more time later on. Okay, we've made this mistake of not recognizing that early in the season. We're trying to avoid that mistake again. Yeah.
Dennis, you said during the break that it was a bad season for mites this year.
Oh yeah. So we do, because we have the tech transfer teams, and so we get real numbers when they're coming in. And the mite levels across the Midwest are much higher than traditionally, I think. We had our record mite count from one Wisconsin hive, 3 mites per bee, not per 100 bees. That's 300 mites per 100 bees.
Visual inspection.
Yeah, so that's just not, I've never even heard, like, you should have heard them cursing having to count those bees upstairs. So we've had some really high, like, I wouldn't say, we've had a lot more of those outliers where it's really, really high in stables, in stable populations. So we've seen some mites. I think that some of it is the result of amitraz. I think that the honey has been really good, so people have kept their honey supers on. And also in years where the spring is good and it starts early, you start to see more mites because the brooding has started earlier. And traditionally, and this is something we have a couple more years of data to show this, but when you've had a bad year, usually the next year the mites are lower, and that's because you've killed off all the mites and bees because of the high mortality. So I think this year might be a perfect storm where some of the states had a better year than most in the winter.
What happens to mites in like areas where temperatures dip below 10 degrees Fahrenheit?
Yeah, they cluster with the bees. They're on the bees, right? They're always on the bees.
So they still survive the winter.
Yeah.
I mean, in that cold.
Well, they're not that cold. They're in with the bees.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right.
You said you started early. How does that work into your cycle between almonds and splits and honey production, time-wise?
Started early for getting the mite levels down. We come out of almonds and split every colony immediately out of almonds and start with our treatments right then. And then when I see things like when you do your fall treatment, we're mid-June. We are again already starting with treatments again. And the thing is if you want to breed for resistant mites, hit them with a 99% efficacy treatment again and again. Okay? If you hit them with a 5% efficacy treatment, you'd never get resistant mites. There'd be no reason for it. Somewhere between a 5% efficacy and a 99% efficacy is a sweet spot where you're not putting a strong selective pressure on for resistance to develop. So what we shoot for is usually around looking for a 50% efficacy most of the time. And if we really want to clean them up, we'll use formic acid, something that they're unlikely to soon develop resistance to. So what we'll be doing is treatments at lower efficacy treatments just to keep them down. If you can start with mites near zero early in the spring, you don't need high efficacy treatments. And what we also find is using a treatment that you're not trying to get the high efficacy is gentler on the bees. And so we do multiple treatments through the year, just keeping that level down. It's way easier to get Varroa down and keep it down than it is to let it get way high and then try to bring it down. As Dennis says, the horse is already out of the barn by the time you get your virus epidemic going.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and we're trying to send a load to almonds, and I'm trying to decide, we just finished treating them, do I treat them one more time before I go, or do I try to wait until they come back?
Well, again, you're looking at your mite counts, and I'm completely with Dennis. It opens your eyes. We do mite washes every single day, all throughout the summer. Okay, we start, at least every week. We're doing it early in the season. Starting in June, we are doing mite washes every day, so we always want to have a feeling of where our operation is. And we treat on an operation basis, not on a high-by-high basis. And we treat when the first few colonies we see start getting up there. I've had some real eye-openers this year as we've gotten our mite washing quicker, so it's feasible for us to get hundreds of mite washes within the colony. You have a really different picture of what's happening in your operation. When you're only sporadically testing a few colonies, it's easy to miss the mite bombs. The other thing that we're starting to do this year now is when we do a mite wash in a colony, we're taking one of those MiteAway Apiguard, those strong cardboard pads. I don't like putting them in the hive because the bees don't chew them up, so we have to find a use for them. So they're really good. You do a mite count, you pick up your lid, it sticks right in there, and you push down the lid, and they stay stuck in there, they don't blow away. You take a felt pen, you write down the date and the mite count. And then when you go back to that yard the next time, you know the hive to do your alcohol wash on again, because you've already got an alcohol wash and mite count and date right on there. I'm really lousy at record keeping, okay? So if we can just keep it in the field, it's really easy. So you go out there, and what you're looking for then is a trend. Keep an eye on the trend. Rather than individual mite counts, track the trend in each yard, and you can see how it's going in that yard. Yeah?
We were talking about, if you have 20 hives in your apiary and you've got 10 apiaries, and you don't have a lot of staff because the green cards didn't come through, do you test all of them?
Oh, Dennis is going to give you a firm number on how many to test.
If the colonies are the same size, if they're equal strength, 8 colonies is representative of the yard.
Same? Okay, good.
I mean, not if you have 5,000 colonies in the yard, but yeah, a normal apiary, 8 is the standard. That's from the Spivak lab, yeah.
Check the ones on the end or the ones in the middle?
Well, I think you randomly do it. Actually, and that's a really good question. There is a difference where it is depending on direction, but I think it's the wind and all that. I think you just randomly select 8. I think that's how I would do it.
I'm gonna go back to oxalic acid just for a minute. I'm considering it, but I heard your take on it. I'd like to hear Randy's take on oxalic acid, vaporization versus dribble.
Word for word what Dennis said.
Okay.
Wow. Does anyone have a chair? Where's the chair?
On the carbide?
No, the same thing. We tried it, and safety risk to the operator wasn't worth it. The dribble works so well. So if you're doing oxalic dribble, you can spill it all over yourself. I'm not recommending you spill it all over yourself. You spill it all over yourself, it's no big deal. It's just super safe. When you're mixing it, you just don't get crystals on your fingers and rub them on your eyeball. You're fine, okay? The stuff is really safe. The vapor, just breathe the vapor one time. No, don't do that.
It's hard.
It's nasty stuff.
How about efficacy though?
Efficacy. Because we get really good efficacy with the dribble. If there's no brood, I'm totally happy with it. So why would I risk my life when I'm totally happy with an alternative one? But we set a garden sprayer, calibrate it, use a graduated cylinder until you learn how to read the stream. And after each practice, you can read the stream so that I put out 5 milliliters per second. And you just stand there and you just count 1 second up and down the seams. So you can hit 10 seams of bees in 10 seconds. 10 seconds for an application of something in a box is totally doable for us. I don't see the vaporization saving time. Now, the only place I see the vaporization being handy is like up in Canada, where you pull your honeysuckers, the next day everything's frozen solid. And they have to get out. So there I can see the advantage of vaporization. But if you have
Okay, Randy, what we need to do is we need to do a lightning round because there's a bunch of things. So we have 1 minute for every answer right now. Go ahead.
Well, this goes off what you were just saying.
Sorry,
on your
you're
website.
next.
You split the brood box and you're spraying up and down.
Yeah, we don't spray, it's a dribble. Okay.
What's the harm in just popping the lid and letting
If we see the vocal cluster in the upper box, we take the lid off and we dribble from the top. It depends on where the cluster is. Man, using common sense, you need to get it on the bees. So open the box, see where the bees are, use your common sense on how to get it on the bees.
When your hive that you didn't treat implodes and it becomes a hive bomb, now the mites don't fly, so how do the mites get into all the rest of the hives around?
When bees start robbing, they release alarm pheromone, or the defenders do. The mites apparently pick up that signal of the alarm pheromone and say, hey, now it's time to swap to a bee that smells different and hitch a ride the hell out of there.
So the robber bees is how they get out.
Get out very, very effectively through the robbing.
Okay.
I also think that there's drift. I mean, I think
Oh,
that the
there's
bees leaves.
absolutely drift. The data is really strong on the drift. Oddly,
One more.
you can have one colony sit next to another with one super high mite count and another single. But this 3 days ago, he went out in this yard of the 75 I was doing a trial on. The 3 highest mite counts were 3 colonies side by side. And we just think, man, is that just fluke, or we don't know. But we often find 2 colonies side by side, one with sky high mite counts and one with very low.
One more. I have to start paying these guys double time pretty quick. So.
I thought that already happened.
One more?
Oh, good.
You want to start out the season with as low a mite count as you want, as you can get, right?
Yeah.
What about packages?
It'd be very, if you want to use Apivar, an Apivar, single Apivar strip put into a fresh package when you put it in there, no mites can enter any